Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Vic Police News. Of course, it's National Child Protection Week for 2016, and we want to make sure that as part of the series of events that are on this week, bringing attention to these issues, that we also made sure that some of our experts at Victoria Police were able to provide some information in relation to child protection issues generally. So earlier this week, we asked our audience to provide us with some questions around child protection issues that they thought we might be able to assist with by way of general information or specialist advice. So to help us this afternoon, we've brought in three experts from within Victoria Police to try and help us answer some of your questions. We have Amanda Fahey. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Graham.
Patrick Tidmarsh. How are you, Patrick?
Yeah, good, Graham. Thank you.
And Joe McDonald joins us as well. Welcome to you too, Joe.
Thanks, Graham.
Now, without further ado, we'll kick off with some questions, and we'd like to ask each of you, I think it's 2 questions each, from our audience. And if you need any help answering, I'm sure everyone here can chime in as well and provide answers if we need additional information as a result of these questions. So, you happy to kick off?
Definitely.
Let's do it.
Terrific. So, first of all, Amanda, I'll direct the first question to you from our audience. The question is, I'm looking for some advice for myself and the teachers at my son's school. My son has a scary habit of getting very angry and running off. What can I do about this?
Okay, well, as a youth resource officer, I'd probably like to start off by saying that early intervention is key. So I would acknowledge the discomfort that the person may have had in making a call to police in the first place, and offer my assistance and support to be able to help them and the young person. I'd want to know about the age of the young person and any behaviours that the young person might have that the parent's concerned about, both at home and at school. Because often when a parent does ring police, it's beyond the typical adolescent challenging sort of behaviour.
Yeah.
So, with the information I've got there, it's hard to gauge what the level is, but I'd want to know if there's any immediate concerns that the parent has for someone's safety. I'd want to know if any criminal offending has occurred and what level of offending. Are we talking, using insulting words to parents, or are we talking actual physical violence or threats of violence, use of weapons? There's so many different levels that unfortunately sometimes it does get to.
Yeah.
As a youth resource officer, I'd want to know if the school is involved in or aware of the parents' concerns, and if they have put a plan in place. I'd want to know if the parent is comfortable. If they're not, if the parent's comfortable contacting the school. If not, I could facilitate that for them, because as a young person, we'd hope to keep them engaged at school, and they certainly would need that support at school.
And you go to schools all the time as part of your role. You're out there educating the community on a daily basis pretty much, aren't you?
Yeah, so in schools, in a preventative way, delivering, not in response, but in a preventative way, delivering presentations on many different topics. This morning I was at a school as a belated Are You OK Day celebration, and I delivered a presentation on sexting from Year 7 to Year 12 students. And then there's also more the reactive type involvement that we do have when a parent or a school or sometimes even a young person rings up with concerns. So there's 2 different ways we can go into schools.
Yeah, and that's really important that we continue to do that. As you say, prevention is the answer here. So getting that information to our young people is absolutely critical. We keep doing that, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, well, thanks for that answer. Patrick, perhaps if I put the next question to you from our audience, and also perhaps just give us a quick précis of your qualifications in this area. I know that you're a world's leading expert in this area, so perhaps give us your qualifications and then as part of the answer. But the question from the audience is a general one relating to child grooming.
Yep.
The question is, what is child grooming? Because we do hear about it in the media from time to time. What is child grooming? How does it happen, and what should I be looking for? This is actually the question I get asked the most in relation to these issues.
Is it? So I've been working for Vic Pol for 9 years. I work in the sexual offence and child abuse team. It's my job to teach police officers to understand sexual offenders and to improve their investigations. And we've been working on new models of investigation. Before that, I spent 20 years in the treatment field working with adult offenders in prisons in the community and running a program that some people might know called MAPS, the Male Adolescent Program for Positive Sexuality. So working with young people with sexually abusive behaviour problems. To grooming. So looking at the posters behind us, talk about violence. Most children, violence is from people they know. The same is true in sexual offending. So it's really important for people to know that and particularly with children, they nearly always know the person that is abusing them. They've nearly always known them for some period of time. The vast majority of sexual offending happens between people who know each other. Here's what the process is. So because the offending happens in a relationship, whether it's a matter of weeks or months or sometimes years, offenders will spend manipulating children into trusting them, manipulating parents, manipulating organisations, making people feel comfortable with them so that they can have access to opportunity to offend. Right. And there's some really important things that happen in this process. As one of the men in treatment years ago said to me, he said his grooming process was get the child to do what I want them to do, minimise the chances of getting caught, and if I possibly can, make them feel responsible for what's happening to them, because if I can do that, I know they're not going to tell
Making them feel like they're the guilty party.
Making them feel like they're the guilty party, and it's really important that people understand that. These guys are really good at making children feel responsible for what's happening to them, and it isn't their responsibility whatsoever.
That's really interesting. And what should I be looking out for?
Well, if you're working in an organisation, the first thing you're looking out for is, does your organisation have a child protection policy? Does it understand sexual offending? Does it know how to recruit people? Does it know how to deal with volunteers? Does it have child-safe practices? So that's first and foremost. And the next thing you then notice, if your organisation does have those child-safe practices, is these guys become visible and audible because they're going to need to move those practices in order to get access to children. Within families and within other relationships, it's much harder to tell because a lot of what it looks like something really normal. So it would be easy if this were real life and sex offending looked like that, but it doesn't work like that. It's trust built over time. It's little changes to relationships over time. That's why it becomes so difficult for children to tell, and only about 1 in 10 children do tell during childhood, so a very small percentage, because grooming can be so effective and because that being made to feel responsible is such a trap.
Yeah, look, it's an area that, because, as you've said, the victim and the offender so often, in the vast majority of cases, know each other. There's already been a power relationship established.
Absolutely.
And so it becomes really difficult to then have the confidence to report, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's a fear there about reporting.
There is, and lots of offenders that will spend time working on the parents as well, or working on the organisation. So when the child looks at the relationship that man has with their parents, that he's trying to make it harder for him to tell those parents. So it's perfectly understandable that it's difficult to tell, but obviously we really want children to come and tell.
Jo, you had
as a practitioner in the field, dealing with kids that come to us after offending behaviour has occurred, for a parent, probably you need to try to find the signs to prevent that from happening beforehand. And I think what we find is when the kids I've spoken to, it has been that degree of guilt. This is our little secret, don't tell anyone, are kind of common words that are spoken to the kids. And if you tell anyone, you're going to get in trouble. So it's about, as a parent, a way to protect your child is to have that open and honest, trusting communication style with your kids that doesn't matter what it is, how bad a thing you might have done or how terrible you think the consequences are going to be, it is okay to come and talk to us and tell us, and there's nothing that can't be fixed. And I think that will encourage the kids to come forward and report it, and that's probably the initial hurdle for us as police to investigate and prevent these crimes is we don't know what's out there. The kids that I've spoken to that come into our unit, there's common themes that we hear amongst the kids. It might be, that it's always, like Patrick said, majority of the time it is someone known to them. So at family functions, it's like, come out and play, or try to isolate the children into other areas. He's such a great bloke. He's always, because a lot of them are male offenders, he's always looking after the kids. He's always volunteering to play with the kids, outside playing with them. Come down to the street, we're just going to get some milk, we're going to get, pick something up from the shops. It's that slow isolation of the child. casual touching of, safe parts of the body they might consider on the arm, on the back, just little things, just testing the children to see whether, and if they're going to say anything. And if the child doesn't say anything, then the touching becomes to more intimate places. And so the kids that we speak to and statements that we take, there's this theme of slowly grooming for us is that slow behaviour working up to actual offending, to the point where the child believes this is normal, or they are in a state, this is how people interact with kids, things like that. And so it's just those slow little touching isolation behaviours, and the words are really effective. Don't tell, this is our secret. And a lot of parents that we speak to say, I was home and nothing's going to happen, I'm there. It doesn't take very long for a touch to lead to offending behaviour, and that's the thing. You can be vigilant with your child, but this grooming behaviour is a pattern that we see with most kids that we talk to.
Yeah, thanks.
So there's a couple of things that I really want to back up. We said about the relationship between parents and children. So the safest protection is the ability of parents to talk to their kids about relationships and sex. And the one thing that we sort of haven't touched on yet is the online environment. So in particularly knowing who people are talking to, who's talking to them, having discussions about, because obviously you can't be vigilant of every moment your child's online and everything they see in every person, but how much can you talk about that and talk about the people they're connected to, and those are the best protections within families.
And we could have a whole show on online.
Absolutely,
so it becomes so complex.
Yeah, it has.
So we might just stay with you. Now you work in our sexual offences child abuse investigation teams. You're dealing day in, day out with offenders and victims in this area. It's really important work and really hard work, and the investigators that do this work, such as yourself, we're always full of admiration for the work that you do. The question I had for you from the audience probably touches on some of the things that you've broadly outlined already, but it's really around safety advice. From seeing the offending that you've seen and you've investigated, for a parent, what's the best sort of safety tips with kids? Like, for example, how do you talk to your child about these issues in a safe way?
Yeah. And I think the kids that we come into contact with, it's always after the fact, and we always try to say to parents, it doesn't matter how young your child might be, it is to encourage that conversation. Most parents are very busy during the day, and it's like, did you go, how was school today? And it's yes, no answers. So it's to encourage kind of open communication with the kids, so it's just not a yes, no answer, it's to elicit further information, because the style of questioning that we do without the children that come into our office tell me about their open-ended questions. So it's to encourage that conversation with kids, to start to articulate a little bit more about their daily interactions with what's going on, and it's also about talking about parts of their body that are the private parts of the body. People get very, I don't want to talk about those things, but this is where this particularly sexual offending leads to, and that's because of that concern, like I can't talk about those parts of my body. Then we find children that are less likely to be able to name the private parts of their body in a confident manner are the ones that seem to be offended against, because I'm not saying that, if you can say the parts that you won't be offended against, but a lot of the kids are very shy about it. And the conversations about, even just, educating kids about sex, so rather than going to school and talking to other kids or getting online, have those conversations from an early age. Kids are so exposed to so much, and they're not kids for very long, so we need to intervene early in that sense. And just about, stranger danger, things like that, even just, walking down the street, walking from home, try to be with your children, try to have that active involvement with your kids. Don't just let them go down to the milk bar or let them go down, walk to school. Encourage them not to talk to strangers. If someone approaches you, to encourage them not to talk to someone, or go to the nearest house, knock on the door, can you call the police? Teach kids how to call 000, their name, their address, where they are. And I think one of the biggest things, even from uniform right through to our specialist area, we find, we'll hear parents saying, if you don't behave, we're going to get the police and police are going to lock you up. And it's heartbreaking for us in the specialist unit, where we're talking about, child physical assaults and sexual assaults, like two of the most horrific crimes you can get aside from homicide, that we want kids to talk to us. So we don't want parents to encourage children to see police as, we'll lock you up.
We're not the enemy.
Exactly. We want parents to be able to say, you can tell the police, it's safe to tell the police will help. So they're kind of just general safety tips that we that we hope that people can pass on to their kids.
I think it's important for people to know what a lot has changed in policing in the last 10 years. I mean, there are 28 specialist socket units. There are 400 specially trained investigators. We have 7 multidisciplinary centres. We work with child protection and centres against sexual assault, all in the same buildings. We've moved a long way, and we're much more open to the stories that come in the door than we may have been 10 years ago. We hear better, we listen better, and we take stories better. And it's been some very important shifts.
And you got all those numbers exactly right. You probably host the next show yourself.
That's all right. I've been burned into my mind. Yeah.
As an educator going into schools at younger levels, right up into secondary, it's a really fine line, and there needs to be a balance of delivering messages in a way that might come across as scare tactics, as opposed to, putting out there that most people are doing the right thing, most adults are trustworthy, and then obviously, giving the protective behaviour strategies on top of that.
And that's the sort of information you're giving out on a daily basis through your work.
Yeah, that's.
Amanda, I might stay with you because the next question is quite specific in nature, and we hope that the person that sent this question in is watching now, because it relates. You can see this question really relates to a specific experience someone's having right now. The question is, I know of a family which includes 2 male children. The oldest child has been charged with violent criminal offences, and I'm concerned that the 12-year-old is heading down the same path. What can be done?
Okay, so look, that unfortunately is a common scenario that I would see as a youth resource officer, and doing youth patrol shifts where that exact situation presents, and it is difficult because it can be present in many ways. It could be that sometimes the parents are have an apathetic attitude, and you might have also parents that are extremely concerned but haven't been brave enough to make that call to police for support. Yep. And it may be that police officers have been to that home to arrest the older brother, or executed search warrants at the home, and that there might be some trauma there that younger boy has experienced. So there's a lot of issues just in what you've told me in that scenario. I would be wanting to know what this is a caller or someone who's attended at the police station, so it's not a parent ringing. How the person knows that information, do they know actually what's happening in the family home, whether there could be some bullying going on directed at the younger brother by the older brother, whether there's any family violence that that person might know about. Obviously police checks would be done to see what we know about that family. Being a younger boy, school again would need to be involved and part of that team. Victoria Police, it would depend if the boy's been offending already. Is he doing it after hours? Is he, are parents allowing him to be after school, head out late at night? Is he doing it with the older brother? So there's so many things to consider. But in terms of what action police can take, it might be appropriate to do a Victoria Police referral if the 12-year-old is at risk, as it appears as though he is, or it could be a referral to DHHS Child Protection if it's another level up and that young boy is actually engaging in risk-taking behaviour of a criminal nature.
And certainly in the immediate sense, if there was a need for further information, even a call to even Crime Stoppers at 1800 333 000 could enable at least some pathways to establish so that person could get some more information about what might be necessary there.
Absolutely. Ideally, I would hope that a better option would be that the caller is happy to leave their name so that further information can be obtained. But I understand, I understand that some people aren't comfortable doing that. So that would be the second best option, to make an anonymous call to Crime Stoppers and provide as much information as you know to help police.
And just on that, I think too, there's a community expectation and legislation surrounds that in relation to notifying Department of Human Services. So if you feel a child is at risk of sexual or physical violence, emotional neglect at home, or environmental neglect at home, you can make a call to Department of Human Services as well, or police. that information is protected, so you don't have to have, I've got absolute evidence of that behaviour. But if you see a child that is acting out and is angry, potentially committing criminal offences, and parents are not acting protectively, if you have protection concerns, please notify Department of Human Services, please notify police, because then we can make those appropriate assessment referrals and perhaps prevent some bad things happening to kids.
And police has protective conveners. We are mandated to do that, but as Joe said, any person can make that call.
Absolutely, anyone can.
Anyone.
Yeah, and that's a really important message, I think, to get out there. Yeah. Patrick, the next question was to you, and with your experience, in most cases, do people who sexually offend against children recognise what they've done is wrong?
No, because they work very hard deliberately not to recognise that. And there's quite a lot of very good research and theory on the mechanisms they put in place in their mind to persuade themselves that what they're doing isn't hurting the other person. So there's distorted thinking.
Yep.
That they use to say, this is a relationship of love, I'm just teaching them something, this is special, she came on to me, a whole variety of distorted thinking designed to keep them away from the realisation that what they're actually doing is harming another human being. So they're very good at it. And when you work with them in treatment, you got to go slowly through the stages of realisation, because people don't come to an understanding of what they did very easily. It should be a painful realisation that what you did was not a relationship that was special and lovely. It was actually, harming another person.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe?
And as a practitioner, you see the flip side to that with the victims, because a lot of the comments that they will make to us are that, it didn't hurt and it wasn't, it wasn't something that was painful at times. Sadly, it's not only the offenders that have that mentality at times. Sometimes parents or, other people might think, well, but, he wasn't hurting them, he wasn't doing this. They try to minimise the behaviour as well. And to encourage people to report and to protect kids, we have to kind of change that way of thinking.
It sounds like many people, generally speaking, the offenders aren't sort of going to put their hand up and themselves and say, I need help here. Often it's going to require someone to blow the whistle to bring those sort of services to bear, isn't it?
Well, there are some organisations around the world. There's a group called Stop It Now. There's a now famous program in Germany working with people before they offend, who recognise that they have problems in the way they think about children.
Okay.
They think about them sexually. The way anyone here would access help, if they were thinking about children and in a way that they realise that they shouldn't, then they should be going and seeing a mental health practitioner, and they can look up on the websites of the various boards who specialises in this area, or they should be contacting forensic care and going getting help for that before they go on to put those thoughts into practice. But you're absolutely right, for the most part, by the time help arrives, it's usually in the form of a charge and a conviction and
it actually ends up triggering it all.
Yeah.
And we, in our units as well, we often get notifications of children, like, as young as 6 and 7, displaying sexualised behaviours and parents panicking, is my child going to become a sex offender? So we as police will often go to schools and speak to these kids and make referrals to SECASA, in the Dandenong area, the South East Centre Against Sexual Assault.
Yep.
There's also the AWARE program, which is a branch of the SECASA unit that deal with adolescent children displaying sexualised behaviour. So there is intervention. Department of Human Services also works. So if you have concerns that my child's displaying some type of behaviour, there's other referrals that can be made to perhaps prevent the point where they're being charged.
Yes, it's really important that when people see these behaviours, that early intervention is absolutely critical here. We're quite advanced in Victoria. We've got therapeutic treatment orders for kids between 10 and 14. We've got a whole range of services. AWARE, Children's Protection Society, MAP still runs. There's lots of services for young people with sexually abusive behaviour problems. And there are lots of services now across Australia and New Zealand dealing with this. So if people see these issues arising, they should be seeking help at the earliest opportunity. And most of that help for young people is actually completely outside the judicial system. They can be accessing therapeutic help without their kids ending up on corrections orders of various kinds, youth justice orders.
Okay. Final questions to you, Joe, but I think, Amanda, you might want to buy in on this one as well, given your experience. And it's about how do you tailor advice for children, smaller children, vis-a-vis teenagers, because that's often a different sort of conversation. And the question is, how do I tailor my advice, particularly around sexual offending, to young kindergarten-age children versus teenagers?
So that goes on from the being able to have that conversation with your children about private parts of the body, being open and honest about them. We always speak to kids, regardless of their age, that about awareness of their body, that no one is allowed to touch you on these parts of your body. And people tend to forget that sex offenders also want children to touch them. So it's not just that don't allow a child to be touched. Yep. Also, we say to the kids, don't touch anyone else on their private parts. And then we tend to try to talk with the kids about people that we feel safe in telling, because the disclosure is going to help prevent ongoing offending. So we say to parents to talk to the kids about, who would you feel safe telling? Most of the times when we talk to the kids, they rattle off mum, dad, uncle, aunts, things like that. And unfortunately, a lot of the offending behaviour can be committed by people that they know. So we try to keep away from all family members and get down to police to encourage that reporting to us. Teachers as well, who are mandated to report to police or DHS. Doctors, so people that are mandated to report the potential offending behaviour, we tend to try to get them to encourage that with the kids, and just having those open conversations and reinforcing it's no good just to have it once, because kids will probably tune out most halfway through the conversation. So it's about just that repetitive conversations. In terms of older kids, teenagers, sexting is the big thing for us, and it's about being aware of your body and being proud of yourself and taking some ownership in terms of I'm not going to lower myself or lower my standards just to fit in. It's about obviously those considerations, and then we try to explain to kids, you take a selfie of your breasts or other parts of your body and you put it online, there's offences if it's to your boyfriend who's of a similar age. People might go, oh, that's okay, but what happens when you break up, or what happens when it gets sent on? And you've got considerations of the production of child pornography, things like this. And we try to just explain to kids that once it's out on the internet, you're going for a job in 10 years' time and your employer decides to do some checks and, there's these things coming up. So it's about, obviously having that self-awareness of your own body, but then also who are you talking to, and is it really another 15-year-old child that you're talking to, or is it a 60-year-old male that perhaps is, is a registered sex offender that no one knows about? So it's about the parents being involved. If you want to use Facebook, if you want to use all these apps and accounts, we need to be able to actively monitor them and who you're talking to, and just having that involvement in their lives.
And as soon as you send that photograph, you're giving power to the person
Absolutely.
that you're sending it to, aren't
Absolutely.
you?
So the most targeted groups, 13 to 17-year-old girls are the most targeted group online by offenders, and 13 to 17-year-old boys are the next most. So because that's the age at which their world is now absorbed by that technology. So it's really important parents understand how important that phase is.
Amanda, the teenagers you talk to, they live online, don't they?
Well, I was going to say that sexting for some young people is the new form of flirting, and posting nude photos, and sometimes there are legalities, but sometimes it's just an individual making a decision about whether it's an appropriate behaviour in terms of what has been discussed, that the relationship might end and that photo is online. And what I deal with in some schools is when a photo can resurface, and it doesn't necessarily resurface by the offender that has originally posted it and caused them trauma, but it can resurface a couple of years later, and it can be someone else in the school who, one instance, on Christmas Day sent a photo to someone online with a personal message with that nude photo 2 years on. So it does have ongoing consequences.
And it also too, not only in terms of, have criminal offences been committed, or, just their sexual safety is at risk. It then transposes to bullying behaviour within schools. So if someone finds out a photograph has been sent around, and then the kids start to bully a child, so we've got all those, risks to a child in terms of bullying at school, and how do we mitigate that, and how do we protect children against that? And a lot of people might say, but it's not contact offending, so it's on the internet, it's safe, but it leads, this is where it begins, and it leads to, okay, do you want to meet up? And parents are so busy working and and they haven't got time at times to spend time with their children. And so if they're getting bullied at school, there's some person that wants to meet up with me, that cares about me, and that's how this kind of it keeps kind of unfolding to contact offending.
There's no difference between the online world and the real world. They're both the real world, and in some ways the online world is more of the real world for young people because of how much time they do spend there. So,
Patrick, we know the links between the online offending and contact offending are far more prevalent now than even we first thought.
Yeah, yes, they are. Yeah, so there are offenders who are using imagery to prop up their distorted thinking. There are people who are drifting via child pornography into contact offending, and there are also others for whom all their offending is actually just what's online. They don't want offending against real people in real time. So there's a really complex picture of who's using that. Can I just go back to a previous one and make a sort of general comment? So in the research about sex education and information for young people, there's a really strong body of evidence now put out by august bodies like the World Health Organization and so on that says well-targeted age-appropriate sex education, including about things like sexting and body image and consent and negotiating relationships, is preventative against abuse, but also children who grow up through those programs, they tend to have sex later on than those who don't. They have fewer STDs, their teen pregnancy rates are lower. So I think it's one of the challenges for all of us, whether we're in law enforcement or education or wherever, or parenting, to be able to have that information and give that information to young people as early as possible, because it's highly protective against a whole range of things that are coming their way, including on the online world, online pornography use and so on.
And I think the issue as well is that because sex education is often provided in schools, sometimes as parents we can think
it's
that's
their responsibility to
the school, when in fact that protective conversation the parent needs to have with their child is very important, that consciously the parent is saying, well, actually that's my responsibility as a parent. I've got to have that protective conversation.
And I was talking to a police officer yesterday in a training course, and she said she has those kinds of conversations all the time. And then she paused and she said, but my husband would never have those conversations. He's a police officer as well. So really there's men have to get involved in this conversation, and dads as well as mums.
Especially with lots of separated families as well. Kids are at risk in two locations if they're with mum or with dad. So as a father and as a mother, you're equally responsible. And being able to have that conversation about sex education and sexual safety allows then for the kids to feel safe in disclosing if something has happened as well.
Absolutely.
parenting is hard and probably harder than ever, but the beauty of technology is that there are resources there that even parents can access online.
Yeah, there are lots.
And reputable websites that they can go to for any sort of issues, drug issues, any mental health issues.
Cyber safety.
Yeah, cyber safety.
Education.
Yeah.
Very good information
We
online.
spoke about some of the dangers of the internet today, but there's a lot of
There's
good
lots of
benefits there that
resources.
you can get some really great help
Absolutely.
and information.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well that is all the time we've got today to handle your questions. So we know we've got a lot more questions than we were able to answer. So I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question, but I hope the information that's been passed on today has been helpful to you in any case. Child Protection Week National Child Protection Week is a very important week. It's a great opportunity to talk about these issues. We've had some difficult matters discussed today, some really difficult subject matter, but it's important that they are discussed, and National Child Protection Week is a great week that enables us to focus on these issues and have these important conversations. Could I thank you all for joining us? You're all doing great work, and I know I speak on behalf of the community, whether it's in the critical area of prevention, responding to offending, dealing with offenders and victims, or in setting best practice to make sure that our work is at the cutting edge. You're all doing very valuable work, and I speak on behalf of the community, I'm sure, and I thank you for all the hard work that you're doing on what is a daily basis. So thanks for your time today, and thanks for all the important work you're doing in this area.
Thanks for
Thank you.
That's all we've got time for today. We hope to see you again on Vic Police News. Now, if you have got information you need to talk about as a result of today's discussion, Crime Stoppers, of course, 1800 333 000. And don't forget, any time you need police attendance, we're only a call away. Just give us a call on 000. Thanks and good afternoon.